Hello everybody. Today I thought I'd discuss something that's been in my mind for several years now, and it's come up more recently when I showed some photos of how our field has been modified recently, and somebody commented that some hedge or some bamboo grove was displaced, and therefore also looking at the photos, the final one was a lot less natural looking, beautiful from that point of view than the first one. Now, obviously, they weren't thinking of the fact that the season is not right for one, but also we had to remove or displace and cut down a lot of things in order to make space for production, growing space. Now, I'm pretty sure if you look at the same view, the same photo but taken in 6 months' time, it will look even greener and definitely more diverse than the very first photo that was very green before we even started working on the fields. But that's made me think about this topic that has been in my mind for a while. If a wild boar or an elephant, depending on the climate, were to do a disruptive action like the one we have done in a way or another for any reason, whether you agree with it or not, we wouldn't necessarily say, "Oh, that's very unnatural, isn't it?" Like, look at the wild boar, look at the elephant. They've created such a havoc. They're not worthy of being part of the of nature. Okay, and there is this argument of as if nature was a political party that you sign up to, and not something that's within us as much as we are within it. So what's the right of the wild boar and the elephant? And this is obviously a provocation. You know what I stand for, you know what I stand on, which is what I stand for. And it's, I do every day a lot of work in order to reconsider, regenerate our relationship with ecosystems. But let me give you this provocation. What's the right of the wild boar to disrupt its natural environment? And why don't we have the same rights? And what does it stop being the same level of disruption, natural disruption? And when it starts to begin something not good or not natural? So the way I would approach this is the following. In evolution, there are obviously some individuals that push the boundaries. That's the way evolution works. On the purely evolutional sense of things, this happens when a new mutation comes up. And you might have at this very moment somebody who is born with an extra finger, or with an eye that sees a lot better than the other, or who is like 2.5 meters tall. I don't know how many feet that is. And so if they have a reproductive advantage, that is, if they find it easier to find a mate and therefore propagate forward their genes, they might allow that mutation, that new feature, to move on to the next generation, and therefore to become the new, between quotes, inverted quotes, or not inverted quotes, the new standard, the new normal, the new natural. So that's purely evolutional. Let's call it avant-garde, okay? Somebody who's at the front and changes things. And there'll be individuals who are like that. Then there is a more cultural, if you want, avant-garde. And that is people like, for example, us, who work on syntropic agriculture and ideas that are somewhat novel and unusual in our space, and that see us as a minority, that sometimes is even hindered. And therefore, these ideas might either die out very quickly, or might take hold onto our culture and therefore move on into the future, like capitalism did, or like industrialization did, like the internet that did. Some of these ideas that then become a view of the world, a vision, they can stay. And I would call those cultural avant-gardes. And they include a lot of things. They include those people who believe that we should centralize everything and digitalize our entire existence. That's an idea that unfortunately is taking hold very firmly of our civilization, whereas perhaps other ones like regenerative thinking is struggling. And we'll see. They're not necessarily opposite, but something will emerge, and something will die out. Then there are some ideas which are, and that's where my point lays. There are some, or lies, I think. There are some ideas that are somewhat hybrids. And in fact, I'm going to claim that all ideas, all avant-gardes are actually a hybrid, and there's no difference between cultural and biological evolution from an intellectual standpoint. Take two examples. One is nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are obviously a cultural avant-garde, a cultural idea, a cultural concept. Now they're not avant-garde anymore, they're kind of established truth. We know how they work, we know how to make them, etc. They have the potential, though, to wipe out a lot of life from our planet and therefore influence evolution, the biological aspect of evolution, so how many animals will survive, how many species are going to be around, in a very profound way. Another one, and this is where it becomes all very interesting, is the machine, I guess AI, artificial intelligence, because especially GAI. So if we are going to have an independent general artificial intelligence, which might be not too far in the future, then suddenly you have an intelligence, an entity, let's call it, which can perform better than any human on the planet, and in fact all of the humans on the planet put together, and therefore could decide to do to us what we've done to animals, what we've done to monkeys and etc., put us in a zoo, or what we've done to wolves, which is exterminate us, remove us from what they consider to be their own ground. And obviously there are some ideas there which are, this is again a cultural avant-garde at the moment, but it will have very strong biological or evolutionary implications. Then there's somebody who believes we should avoid problems by creating a symbiosis between machines and humans and our brain, and put chips in our brains so that we are part of that evolution of the machines, between quotes, and so we're not cut out like the wolves or the monkeys were. So what will emerge from this cultural avant-garde, and especially this last ones that I mentioned, the ones that have the potential of being starting as a cultural idea, concept, movement, and then become hugely influential and profoundly impactful on our biological, on the biological setup of our planet, organization of our planet, on ecosystems as such, and therefore condition what's going to survive and what not, and what's going to happen to life on Earth on a bigger scale. These ideas are not that different from the pure evolution that we discussed at the beginning, in my opinion. We are a species that somehow looks very awkward, very strange compared to the others, because we have the potential of acting on a huge scale. We can impact the ecosystems around us much quicker and in a much bigger way. But that we are the result of evolution ourselves, and as such, capitalism and AI and industrialization and corporatization, they are the result of evolution. Because like when the monkeys started to use tools, and now we know that process well, because some primates are starting to use tools to fish in front of our own eyes, so we know how that process happens now. It's not that different. Now we're learning to use artificial intelligence, and so in a way you could argue that nature is doing what nature does. The destruction of the ecosystems around us is just a result of what nature is doing, because there's no difference between us and nature. We are within nature. Nature is within us. We are the same thing. So let me go back to the question: has the wild boar more right to disrupt the woodland and therefore stimulate ecological succession, stimulate the regrowth, stimulate the ecosystem to be reborn from its accumulated wealth, capital, national capital? Does the wild boar have more right to do so than we have to cementify, to remove a whole forest and put concrete in the place of it? I don't know. That is a question for you. What am I trying to say here? Am I trying to justify what humans are doing? No. I'm just pointing at something that is very important for me, and that is the motivation to do what we do cannot come, in my opinion, from the outside, from the impact we have on our surroundings only. Obviously, that is a part, but at the end of the day, motivation comes from within for me, and it is an inner struggle, an inner evolution process. If what motivated me was the hope or the goal of improving the situation we're going in, I would be fooling myself. Not because I think that we are going to lose, as a regenerative movement, but because I'm not even sure that that is what's best, if there is something that is best. We are just trying one avenue, one way. We are one avant-garde, and we're going to have an impact. And whether or not that will live on after us or not, it is not my business. And if that was the only thing that motivated me, well, I wouldn't be so keen to do what I do. What motivates me is much deeper, and I think that is true of all people who do something like us, whether they realize it or not. It's got to come from within. It can either be physiological, we find pleasure in doing what we do. It can be spiritual, so an aware process of improving ourselves in a certain direction, and being happy, trying to work on ourselves and the way we interact with the world around us. Another big source of motivation, for example, is understanding, trying to understand. One of the things that motivates me the most, and it kind of is interrelated to the spiritual, if you want, without getting into personal in this case, is to answer this question of what is the ecological function of man. If you ask this to a bacterium, it would hypothetically reply, we're just a joining link, perhaps between cyborgs and monkeys. If you ask us, we always tend to answer these questions with something cultural, elevated, religious. But from an ecological standpoint, what are we here for? Are we just here to improve the conditions? We're just a slightly higher, more complex form of life, which can improve the conditions of the ecosystem it is in, with disturbance and other things. So this is a huge question for me, because I think it's related to happiness. We are only happy when we interpret our ecosystemic role in the fullest, and we're aligned with what is our ecological purpose. And so that's another motivation source. It can be many things, but I don't think at the end of the day it can come from without. And I'm going to leave you with those questions, with that provocation, and let me know what you think down here.